Hi everyone, and welcome back to Liz Sews. Today is going to be the first in a three-part series on constructing the Diamond Bustier pattern from Pinup Girls. I'm going to show you guys how to add a few more extra pattern details like this contrast panel in the center front and this alteration for crossed straps in the back and a very low back. This allows me to use a 3 tall hook and eye where the pattern typically calls for one that is 5 tall. So let's get started. For this project, you will need the Diamond Bustier Pattern from Pinup Girls, tracing paper, rulers, a marking utensil, pins, sewing machine needles. I'm using the Microtex needles from Schmetz in the 90-14 size. However, if you're having some difficulty with your fabrics, I would recommend going down to a smaller size needle, such as the 80-12 or the 70-10. Sewing machine. I'm fitting mine out with a walking foot here because I find it makes it a little bit easier to be moving the slippery fabrics from lingerie. But if your machine already has a dual feed built in, you probably don't need to worry about it. Thread. I'm using the So Fine thread from Superior. Now let's take a look at the fabrics necessary for this bra. For my main fabric, I'll be using this chestnut duoplex that I purchased from Beware. Links to all the fabrics used will be in the description box below. Contrast fabric. I'll be using the teal Fun Dot mesh that I purchased from Gigi's Bra Supply. This is also available from Bra Maker Supply in Canada. Power net. Unfortunately, I don't have anything that matches these colors, so I'm just going with light copper, purchased from Bra Maker Supply. Before we get into elastics, please note that I'm not going to be providing specific lengths needed, as this depends upon your personal size. Please refer to the back of your pattern envelope to determine how much elastic you should be purchasing. 1.5 inch bottom band elastic. 3/8 inch picot elastic, strapping elastic, underwire channeling, hook and eyes, fold over elastic, boning in cotton casing, 2 underwires in your size. Lastly, 4 rings and 2 sliders in the same size as your strap. If your strap is 1/2 inch, make sure to purchase 1/2 inch findings. Now that we have all the tools set out, let's get started on manipulating our pattern. We will be using the cut pieces from the pattern exactly as drafted. Make sure you select the fabric cut pieces and not the foam ones, as the foam ones don't have any seam allowances included. In the original Diamond Bustier pattern, you can see that the frame is comprised of one single piece that runs from side seam to side seam. In my version over here, I've added an additional seam down the front of the frame that allows me to get this center color block section and still have the beautiful duoplex showing on the side. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do this one. This is my front frame piece. Mine might look slightly different than yours as I've altered it to fit myself. If you're interested in learning more about that pattern fit alterations, I've linked it up in the iCards above. So when you're looking at the frame, one of the things that I think makes a really nice professional finish is ensuring that your seam in the frame line here meets up with your lower cup seam here. That way it looks like one continuous line. In order to do that, all you need to do is locate where that is on your frame. Luckily, we have notch marks that already indicate that intersection. So in this case, I am going to go with the second notch mark down, right? This is the upper cut piece, and then this is the first lower cut piece. So the second notch mark in from the center front, and I'm going to connect that with wherever you want to along the bottom of the frame. Just keep in mind that, you can angle it in more severely like this, or you can come sort of straight down. In this version, I've gone straight down. Here's an example of what it looks like if you try to take that angle in at a little bit more of an angle. This might give the illusion of a more hourglass waist if you're interested in that. So I'm going to go with that, just slightly angled in. Now I need to copy this over onto tracing paper. We're going to split this up into 2 pattern pieces. This center bridge will be cut on the fold, and then you'll need 2 of these outer frame pieces. When we split them up, we will need to add seam allowance along that line. These will be our 2 frame pieces. You'll cut one of these on the fold out of your duoplex and one on the fold out of your contrast fabric. You will cut 2 of these out of your duoplex. Here's my back band piece. As with the frame, I have modified this slightly to meet my fitting requirements, mostly lengthening it this way. But if you use the pattern that is provided in the envelope, it should also still work. So I have the first edition of this Diamond Bustier pattern, in which they had originally recommended a 3x3 hook and eye. Unfortunately, the way the pattern is drafted, a 3x3 hook and eye is much too short. I also found it didn't give me a whole lot of support along the wires because that hook and eye was really supporting lower down beneath the wires. So I've done a quick little alteration to my pattern that will still allow me to use a 3x3 hook and eye, but I cross my straps in the back. That way I do have that horizontal pull coming right behind where the wires are sitting. So in order to do that, it's just a quick little change on here. First up, I need to make sure that I have enough room for my hook and eye. So the bottom band elastic, the one that's going to go around your waist, I kind of want to make sure that this is going to be seen, so it's going to stick out below the bra. Instead of having just the picots being visible, I'm going to have the majority of this elastic visible. So I really only need 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for that. So I lay that down right there. And then I take my 3x3 hook and eye and figure out where it's going to hit on my back band piece. So the bottom of the picots will have to fit into that hook and eye. So I just lay that over top and then take my pen and roughly mark in where the top of my hook and eye is going to be. Now, it's always okay to overshoot this, that is to make it a little bit wider, but try not to make it smaller than your hook and eye because that's something that you can't fix down the road. So let's go right about there. And then all you need to do is draw a curve that comes out from here and then sort of swoops back in on itself. That will help give you that nice crossed back. Like so. I'll no longer be using that portion of the pattern piece. It'll just be this sort of like backwards C. Now that we've made all of our pattern alterations, let's get started on cutting out the fabrics. I'm going to start out by cutting my duoplex fabric. You can cut out any way that is most comfortable for you, but in my case, I like to use this 28mm rotary cutter. I think it's a lot easier to use the smaller rotary cutter, especially when you're going around curves like the cut pieces. And most of the time I just hold everything in place with my hands and cut it out. I don't bother with pins. I don't have any pattern weights, though that would be a nice addition to have. So I'm going to start with cutting out all of my frame pieces first. Now, duoplex is a fairly stable fabric. If you want, you can give it a little pull to try to find what's the stretchiest way. And I think in this case, my stretchiest way is running side to side. And that coincides with my pattern pieces. I want to make sure my stretchiness is running around my body. So I am going to hold that into place and just cut out. Make sure that you transfer over your notches. I just like to make a little teeny tiny notch with my rotary cutter at the appropriate spaces. Though if you're concerned about cutting into your seam allowances, you can always just do so with a pen or marking tool. So I'm going to go ahead and continue cutting out the rest of my pieces. For all of the cup and the outside frame, make sure that you cut one this way and then flip your pattern piece over and cut one the other way. That way you have mirror images. So that is for the outer frame as well as all of the cup pieces. So let me cut those out and come back to you. Here I have all of my duoplex pieces cut out. For this bra in particular, I do tend to have issues with my lower cut pieces here and getting them confused and their orientation really mixed up. So try to pay close attention to that. The best way I have to do that is just to keep your pattern pieces on top of the pieces themselves. That way it's really easy, and they're also marked. So this one says D and C, and it matches up to D and C over here. So that is the best way I have to sort of keep them organized. Even myself, having cut out a bunch of bras, I did make a mistake and I cut out 2 of the same middle pieces, so I had to throw that away and do a second mirrored one over here. So now that the duoplex is complete, I'm going to get started on cutting out my overlay. So for the overlay, I'm going to basically cut everything out again in the mesh except for these 2 side pieces here. So I'm going to overlay on my bridge and all 4 of each of my cut pieces. And here we have all of the overlay cut out on the bridge as well as the cut pieces. At this point, I like to pin my lower cut pieces together as well as my bridge and outer frame. That way I don't have to worry about things getting misplaced and flip-flopped and lost in the shuffle. I don't do this on a lot of my bras. Most of the time I just pin along as I sew, but for the diamond in particular, as I said, I do find these lower cut pieces here can get rather confusing. Now, as we're pinning together, I want to make sure that I have the shiny side of my duoplex facing up, because I do like that sort of sheen that it gives to the overlay versus having just the matte side facing up. I think that's not as dimensional looking. So let's do the cut pieces first and pin those together. So I'm just going to be looking at the lower cut pieces for now. I'm going to take my center one and I want to align my overlay on top of my duoplex so that everything is lined up evenly. And then I'm just going to turn it 90 degrees to the right hand side. And I am going to attach the overlay to the overlay. So I take my cut piece here and then flip it over on top. You will have notch marks in your cut piece, which help to get things aligned, and it is also a good double check to make sure you have things on the side where they should be. So like that. Now I want to take my other duoplex piece and attach that to the back, and this way we should have the shiny side facing up, so that when it eventually folds out, the shiny side is what you're going to see from the outside of the bra. So again, just pinning that into place. So on the back, you should see a shiny side of duoplex and a matte side of duoplex, because it'll eventually look like that. And on the front, we should have our 2 layers of overlay. So now I'm going to attach this cut piece to the center as well. You want to make sure you have all of the other fabrics out of the way. If necessary, you might want to just put a temporary pin in here just to make sure that you're not catching any of those when you're pinning onto this side. Again, make sure you're keeping careful eye of the orientation of the cut pieces, because you don't want things to get turned around, and with the triangles that can be very easy to do. So I'm going to do the overlay first. And I don't use a ton of pins. I'm just using like 2 or 3 just to keep everything in place. And especially when working with duoplex, I would recommend getting a sort of fine pin, like a silk pin or the such. It makes it a little bit easier to puncture that fabric. And once we have the outer cup attached, we'll go ahead and do the lining. So like I said, I have the shiny side facing up. I'm going to pick this up and attach it to the back of this little sandwich. Now I'm just going to take out that little temporary pin that I put in there before. So we have this put together. So you should have your middle piece is what's sticking straight down the middle, and then you'll have 2 overlays on the one side and 2 duoplexes on the other. And of course, when we get to the sewing portion, this will already be done, and we just need to go over to the machine and do straight lines down both of these edges. So I'm going to go ahead and pin together the second cup. Okay, so my cut pieces are all pinned. I don't worry so much about the upper cut piece just because this one, it's really easy to tell which one goes on which side. The other thing I'd like to pin now while I have it all out is just the frame itself. So when pinning together your bridge piece, the first time I showed how to do this, I showed you the incorrect way and it sewed up wrong. So I am future Liz coming back to show you the correct way to pin this together. So here we have the shiny side of the duoplex, and I want the shiny side facing down, the matte side facing up. Now I'm going to take my side pieces, and again, yeah, I want matte side to matte, so wrong side to wrong side, and I'm going to pin that into place. So you should have the shiny side of your side frame facing up right now. Like so. I'm going to go ahead and do that for the second side as well. Same way, we want the shiny side facing up and matte touching matte. And then once you have both of those side frames pinned into place, you can take your overlay material and pin that onto the top. So you should have a sandwich where you have a bridge on this side and a bridge on this side, and we have the shiny facing out. Okay, so now we can go ahead and cut out the last piece, which is the back band fabric. The last pieces to cut out are going to be the power net. Now, when you're looking at the power net itself, you should sort of stretch it apart and see where these rectangles are facing. And so you want the rectangles, when you stretch it, to get smaller, not wider. So in this case, my rectangles are going this way, and that's the way that I want to position my power net when I'm cutting it out. So power net can be sort of tricky, especially with a rotary cutter, because it's really stretchy and it moves and stuff like that. So the best advice I could give you is try to use a ruler wherever possible. That significantly helps getting a cleaner line when cutting out your power net. And if you do end up getting a line that just looks like your dog ate your homework, it's not the end of the world, since all of these edges are going to be covered down the road with elastic. So try not to be too hard on yourself to get the perfect edge. So obviously this last bit with the curves on it, not as easy to do with a ruler. So I'm just going to go around it and do the best that I can. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 of these out in mirror images. And here we have everything cut out for our bra. This is going to be the end of day 1's tutorial. Be sure to come back next week when we start sewing everything together. See you next time. Take care.